Fundamentals usually fall into a couple of categories: shapes and perspectives, and also color theory. I'm not the biggest on color theory, but I can talk about shapes. Shapes. Oh, shapes. Maybe I need a bigger. Yeah, I'll use a bigger brush. So let's talk about shapes. By shapes and this is something that I do in the few lessons that I give, this is something that I try to hammer as much as I can. Besides this chicken scratching thing that I've spoken about, it's also important that you are able to confidently master the following shapes. The square, and by extension, of course, the rectangle, the triangle, and the bowl. So these basic shapes. Why is it important to be able to master this? It's because for the most part, every single thing in the human body, or every single thing that exists, can be broken down into these basic shapes. And then construction comes in, right? Construction, and perspective. And also the fact that the shapes themselves can bend. By construction, what I mean is that every single thing is made up of a construct of these shapes. I think the most basic one that everyone learns at school when they're kids is a house is made of a rectangle on top and a triangle on top and a rectangle on the bottom. I think this is the easiest example of construction that we learn as kids, right? And you have the rectangles for the windows, everything. So taking two simple objects, you can construct a more complex object. So that's construction. And perspective. Perspective is important because not everything, but you do need to be careful. You do need to be able, not careful, you need to be able to draw the objects in 3D. So let's take the square. So I have my square, right? Or ink. So I have my square. So I did a slight rotation. So here it was very flat. I did a slight rotation and I draw it in 3D. So now my object exists in 3D. And I have another one here. Right. So it's taking the object and being able to rotate it as a 3D object on the paper. So this is a big skill, is applying perspective to an object, to a 3D object, be able to rotate it. Easy. I don't want to say that it's easy, it just comes as you practice. You will probably see a lot of videos on Instagram or YouTube of people doing the fish eye perspective thing, where they have this perspective and they draw a couple of lines right? You've probably seen this before, and they draw, and it's a very, it looks cool, right? It's just a couple of rectangles. Oh, too much ink. It's a couple of rectangles that they draw, and you're supposed to be, oh, that's so impressive. It is impressive, but it's not necessarily complex to do. It's all about practice. And again, and this falls into my first point that I said before, the having fun part. At least for me, drawing rectangles is not necessarily very fun. It's not something that I enjoy doing for a long time. I know people that probably have their sketchbook just filled with a lot of these perspective things. They will have like a 2-point perspective, bigger brush. They will have the brush doesn't have ink, of course. Yeah, they will do the 2-point perspective, 1 point here, another point here, and then they will just draw more boxes. And you're like, oh damn. Sorry, I'm a bit sneezy today. Oh damn. All these boxes are perspective correct. This is so cool. I mean, it's cool, but it's not very fun to do. But you should still do it just a bit, especially if you are not familiar with drawing, or if it's not something that you are overly comfortable with. This is important to do. But don't get caught up on it. Have fun first. I'm just spitting contradictions here. So let's take the triangle. For example, I have the triangle. In 3D, just floating around in space. And then the ball. Fortunately, the ball is the simplest one because you draw a ball. Usually, the 3-dimensionality is through shading or some other technique, shading or shadows. So the ball here now is 3D. You have the sun here. Hey, it's a sun. And the light is hitting here. But the ball is the simplest one. I think the triangle probably might be the hardest one, but it's not necessarily something that you have to do a whole lot. Yeah, just if it's something that you have trouble drawing, try to get a couple of cubes, a couple of balls, a couple of pyramids, physical, and try to draw them at home from multiple angles. Just grab them, put them in the shelf, doing something different, pile them up, and try to draw them. That's a good exercise. So probably my first exercise. But again, don't do it too much. It's not overly fun. It's not overly fun to do. I wanted to get back to how. Before I talk about that, I talk about perspective, construction. I want to talk about bends, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of time. Bend simply means that, of course, the object can be bent in 3D. So this shape here. Oh, let me zoom out. Apologies. This shape here would be this one, just bent. just bending shapes. So you take the cube and you try to bend it. You take the triangle and you try to bend it in 3D. Because as we apply construction to the human body, of course the human body bends, right? So you need to be comfortable drawing these 4 shapes, and then you need to be comfortable applying construction, perspective, and bending the object in the space. Now let's talk about this drawing here and how was it that I did it. And then we can talk about more anatomy in more detail. So I'll take out a new piece of paper. So the drawing here. The drawing here it's not overly complex. Let me grab a red pen, but I still want to break it down for you. So the first thing that's going on here is that I have a small vanishing point here. And the vanishing point spreads out outwards like so. A vanishing point in perspective simply means where how do I even explain the term? I should have read Perspective Made Easy before making this video. But the vanishing point is where your eye, you look at it and where all the lines flow outward from it. There's probably a better definition for that. But yeah, I have my vanishing point here. And I just draw these lines going from it. I don't want to make it too complicated. It's a single point, a single vanishing point in the drawing. Technically there's a second vanishing point extending to the right, but for the sake of simplicity, this drawing is using a single vanishing point here, where the character with the delicious fried tempura is. And the first order of business is that I have, like I said before, I started with this character as the anchor point. So I would imagine something like this. I have, and we will get into detail on this. I would have a mannequin here. Right, I have my mannequin here. And because it's a restaurant scene, I don't necessarily need to think about the entire mannequin. I do try to save my headspace. So I have my mannequin here. I have the joint for the arm. And the arm is doing something like this. So I have my first character here. This is the anchor point from which I base my other characters. Then I have the table. The table is the object that should closely follow the lines set out by the vanishing point. So, like this, right? So you have here, it follows like this. And then, of course, I do need to be mindful of details like where the person is sitting. So I have my chair here. Very important. With this character here serving as the anchor point for my other characters, I then start to more confidently be able to draw the people here in the right closer to the page. So I would, because they are closer to the page, the table they are in is a bit bigger as well. So this is the second table. And then I have the second character. Sorry. And when I did the drawing, the table here is smaller. This is a single table. This is a table for two people. So the table actually extends a bit more. So something like this. But it's just an incidental detail. It goes into here. You have the arm here. Joint here. Hand here. You have the plate. So all is cool. The chair here, of course. And then I have my third character here. And the head is actually bigger. Should be more like this, because the character is closer to the So I have all my mannequins laid out here, and then of course I do need to use photo reference for what's on the table. I wanted to draw the restaurant as it was at the time, so of course I took a couple of reference photos when I was there. You know, the sauces, what were on the plates, what is it that I ate, you know, the tempura, everything. So those incidental details reference all the way. Of course, you can do your own from imagination, whatever works for you. But this is the basic construction. Because the characters are seated, any character that is standing would have the head a bit higher. Makes sense. The person is standing, right? So the waitress here is, of course, standing. And then I also have another character here, because I thought it would make for a more interesting composition to have multiple characters interacting. So I have this character here, right? This one here, the waitress on the right. And then it would be fun to also have a character serving the food. So I think here. Head goes here. Sorry, it should be a bit higher, because it's more or less aligned with this one. They are the same height, more or less, not to make it too complicated. So the characters all share the same height. And then you, of course, because this is a real location, I checked online for a photo of what was the wardrobe used by the folks at the restaurant, so that I try to make it as correct looking as possible. And then for the scene here, it's where the cooks are. And again, it's construction. I'm just using some rectangles here. And probably this is the part where I use the most reference from the photos that I had, where the kitchen was, because I was in this restaurant back in 2023. It's been a year and a half. I don't necessarily recall how was the kitchen. So I did use a photo for reference on how the kitchen was. But you can see here all the hallmarks of what I talked about regarding construction. Rectangles, a lot of rectangles, balls for the joints. more balls here, the logo of the restaurant, which is and then I added some cooks here. So this was what was on my head going on to this. From this to this. If you feel comfortable with applying construction in a very simple perspective and are also comfortable with the basic shapes and how to bend them, then you are able to construct something like this. It's not necessarily needed that you are a master in applying all these concepts at once. I'm not a master myself. There are plenty of perspective errors here in this drawing. But it's okay. It looks enjoyable, at least for me. It looks enjoyable to look at. It's a fun drawing. It's lively. So for me, it's perfect. I like it. I enjoy it, even though it has, admittedly, a couple of errors here and there. But that's cool. And then, of course, you are able to do, if you have this in your head, and then if you also study, which is what we will focus on next, if you have concepts of the human body well figured out in your head, then you can start drawing characters. So I have this one here. So I draw the hair. We can talk about hair, of course, when we talk about the human body. The expression. And one thing that I always say in my classes, the two classes that I gave, is that if you are not drawing the nude body very often, you also don't necessarily need to be very comfortable in drawing the human body, because you can mask whatever, let's say, lack of knowledge or whatever part of the human body that you don't necessarily feel comfortable with. You can mask it with clothing, which is something that I do quite often. You need to be able to play into your strengths. So clothing here, I decided to give the girl like a shirt, and then a sweater style. And here, again, it goes into what is it that you enjoy drawing. Do you enjoy drawing people dressed in a certain style? Do you prefer to draw the nude body? Then you need to study the human body much more carefully. It really depends on what is it that you are looking for and what is it that you want to draw. If you are more of a erotic artist, drawing erotica, of course you need to be very good at drawing the human body nude. Otherwise it will look weird, it will look funky. And then once you are comfortable with drawing the human body very well, then you can of course apply whatever tricks you need to convey the message, either by exaggerating features or whatever it is that you need to do. But everyone that I know that draws erotica, for example, they start with the basics and then they start developing their style, and of course if they need, they exaggerate features to convey whatever it is that they want to convey. Yeah. Something like this, right? So again, to summarize, I have the red very much fresh in my head when I start drawing. This is what I have in my head before I attempt to do a piece like this, like a piece like this.